Hello, well, welcome to Harry Ness, who's already something of a polyglot. He's in his third year studying German and Russian at Cambridge University, and in the middle of a year abroad in Germany, in Trier. German was a language he'd already studied at school, but I gather, Harry, that you started learning Russian from scratch at university.
Yeah, so we got the chance to pick a second language at university, and Cambridge only offers six languages, and Russian was my language of choice for the second one, but I'd never done it before, and they offer a good ab initio program, so I went
So,
straight for that.
so that's what you went for. But you studied Spanish to the end of your school leaving exams to the A levels as well as German. So I suppose,
hmm
I'd wonder why wouldn't you have carried on with Spanish?
Yeah, so for me, it's really about a connection, and I just don't have that with Spanish. I really, really love speaking Spanish. It's actually one of my strongest languages. In fact, I would say it's my second strongest other than German. But when it comes to having a passion for spending a lot of time with the language, it's something I definitely don't have with Spanish because of the literature, mainly. And Cambridge has a big thing about literature. It's not like Oxford, but where you simply can't avoid literature if you do a languages degree. You can more or less get out of it at Cambridge eventually, not in the first year, but I just knew that if I had to write essays on Spanish literature, that it just wasn't going to be for me. So I simply couldn't go any
So,
further with
so
it.
that was a push factor from Spanish. What about the pull factors towards Russian? Was that literature as well? Tolstoy and so on.
Well, I am a big fan of that, but I think the main pull factor was more. It was a combination of everything else not being what I wanted to do, and Russian being a little bit of what I wanted to do. So the other language options were Italian, Portuguese, French, and Spanish, and then obviously German and Russian, which were the ones that I chose. But Italian I'd already studied, but didn't have any qualification in it, so I wasn't able to do post A level. And I also didn't want to do it from scratch because it would have felt like cheating because I'd already come so far on my own. Portuguese was a language that I really didn't like either, in a similar way to Spanish. And then with French, they didn't offer an ab initio course, and I certainly wasn't anywhere near good enough to do post A level. So that sort of pushed me towards Russian in the first place. That was when I decided it was going to be Russian or Italian. And then I love the sound of Russian, and I love how difficult it can be sometimes. And even the first year was absolute torture in terms of the pace we had to study it. I absolutely love the fact that I now can speak Russian.
So you arrive in Cambridge. You've never studied a Slavonic language before, presumably. Don't tell me you're fluent in Polish or something. Um, and you're clutching. I don't know. Did you work through a basic textbook first, or you completely beginners? You're all there. How did it go the first year? You're all in a classroom on the first day. What's it like?
So we get an email about 2 months before we start the first year, telling us to work our way through the first 6 units of colloquial Russian or something like that. 6 or 7 units, I think it was. And then when we arrive on the first day, we have a couple of meetings. And I think the first class we had was Russian reading practice. And we'd obviously never had any proper classes in Russian, but we were given a full-on text in Russian, and we were told to read it out one by one going down, and you could see who'd done the first 6 units and who'd maybe only done three and things like that, and it was all very nerve-wracking. And we actually had four people drop out from the ab initio Russian course within the first week because they didn't realize that they were serious when they said you needed to be a third of the way through this textbook by the time you get there, because that's where we want you to be. There's a reason why they give you that work to start off with, because the pace they hit you with from day one is incredible. I mean, we were reading Russian literature, obviously not understanding everything, but we were reading uh, Pushkin's poems in week 6 of Russian.
Gosh, ничего
Yeah.
себе, as they say. So, I mean, and how many hours a week tuition? You're in small groups? Were you taught by native speakers? How many hours contact time were you getting?
It depends on the class as to whether it was a native speaker or not. So we had native speakers for the speaking practice, which was only 2 hours a week. And then we would have non-native speakers for the grammar supervisions and the reading classes and things like that, which worked on vocabulary, grammar, everything else other than the actual speaking we had classes for. The class sizes were Cambridge is a little different to everywhere else. It's the same as Oxford. We have two or three in a classroom, just two or three students, whereas everywhere else would be a slightly higher number than that. And we had 6 hours a week for Russian of contact time, and then obviously the amount of work I think I had to do per week was 60 sounds a bit crazy, but I'm going to take a guess and say it wasn't too far off that. I can remember that my Thursday always used to be start studying at about 8 in the morning and not finish studying till about 9 or 10 in the evening. Because that was always my day when I had zero contact hours, so I didn't ever have to break the
Yes,
study
yes.
up, so I was able to full on go for it.
Yeah,
But I
but
can
some of the
remember that
time
was always.
you were having to do German as your German studies as well, presumably. So it was,
Yeah,
yeah,
sometime. I mean, I'm saying 60 hours, including German.
yeah.
Really,
So
I mean,
about
I felt
half
like,
of that would have been the Russian.
oh no, 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 no. About 80% of it would have been, would have been the Russian. The German, like when you take on ab initio Russian at a university that goes at this pace, you almost have to forget about improving your other language in the first year and just get by, because they throw so much at you that you simply have to try and keep up. And you know that your A level language is strong enough that you can probably just about keep up with it. And then in exam term, that's when you have to give the other one a bit more attention so you can think about actually doing well.
Yeah. And you mentioned you were having 2 hours with a native speaker. You were being taught a lot of grammar as well. You were having reading practice. In your view, how was the balance? When you're wanting to learn a language fast, some people put emphasis on speak from day one, very communicative approach. This sounds like a mixture of not really that much speaking, which I know partly reflects the emphasis in the exams on writing and literature. But how does it all hang together for you ideally? And was there any tension between what you think it's best to do when you're trying to learn language fast and what you actually had to do on the course?
Yeah, so it was actually a really difficult year for me because it's not how I approach language learning. I'm a big fan of speaking a lot from the start, and only having 2 hours a week in class time and only having very limited time outside of class time meant I couldn't put as much time into speaking as I wanted to, because I had to do all the grammar exercises that they wanted handing in, because it's obviously part of university life. And it did clash with my personal style, but it did also work very well for a lot of people. And grammatically, I feel very sound in Russian now, which maybe I wouldn't do if I'd taken my approach. Maybe I wouldn't be as strong grammatically, but I'd speak better. But for me, it's all about speaking, whereas for Cambridge, it's 6% of your exam is speaking. So it's not very important to them, clearly. I think the year abroad is what they put there for speaking, because they don't put much emphasis on it elsewhere. But yeah, for me, it was personally quite difficult to get along
And
with their system.
but you've chosen to take the year abroad in Germany. So,
Mm.
do you feel will there be opportunities for you? Have you been to Russia? To take the speaking forward later on,
Yeah.
or have you
So I've been
already?
to Russia. I've been to Russia, to St. Petersburg, and I really liked it. I studied at a Russian language school there um, last September, and I really enjoyed my time there. But I felt that because we can only do one language in fourth year, and I know that it's going to be very intense, I thought I'd go with my strongest and really get that up to a good C2 level before I go back, and therefore be able to maybe enjoy the year a bit more and have a tiny bit more free time than I did in years one and two, and possibly take on a new language as well. But I think in terms of Russian, I have Russian friends now who I do a language exchange with in Trier. We do English Russian language exchange because they want to improve their English. And I also have a few people I talk to on Skype as well to improve my Russian. But I don't ever think it will be a language I get up into a C2 area. Probably never.
Yeah.
But I'm very happy with the sort of B2 level I have now, because it means that I can go on fun nights with my Russian friends and do the night in Russian, really enjoy the language, but I'm not able to express it, everything exactly how I would want all the time. But I'm perfectly happy with that.
Yes, yes. You know, in the at the end of the first year, what sort of level were you? And then you're up to B2 by the end of the second, maybe.
Yeah, well, they do tell us that we should be at a B2 at the end of the first year, which I think is absolutely insane. But based on the number of contact hours well, not contact hours, based on the number of hours we've put in, maybe it is a possibility. And we were able to read and understand a lot of literature in Russian by the end of the first year, which is actually only October to the end of May, so it's not even a full year. So maybe reading we were at that level, but personally I felt that speaking we were a long way off that level. But it was only a small amount of the exam, so I would say that reading skills were very high, listening and speaking maybe A2 something like that.
And you mentioned some people dropped out straight away in the first few days, but otherwise, did most people reach more or less the same level and manage to keep up with this pace?
I think the majority did. There was something like 25 of us in the end who carried it on. And maybe like the majority group of 20 sort of kept up with the pace, and then there were the front runners, and then there were the people who really struggled because their only other language was Spanish and they'd never done a language with cases before,
Yeah.
and they just expect you to know what a case is and know its function and everything like that, and that's not something they're going to teach you. That's just going to be something that is something you know, and we're going to go straight past that and move on to verbs of motion or something like that. So people like that did struggle with those concepts which they just expect you to be able to use, and so there were people who fell behind, and there were people who'd done uh, Polish before at school and things like that, who were clear front runners, and people who'd had various experience levels with the Russian language before but never done an exam, so were allowed to do our course. So yeah, but there was a middle group which was definitely around that level.
And some of those have chosen to go and spend their year abroad in Russia to take the language into the
Yeah.
fourth year. Would they then, at that stage, be taught together with those who'd already done Russian at the very beginning? So will they have caught up?
Yeah, yeah. The idea of the course is that by the end of the first year of the course at Cambridge, you are on the same level that anyone who comes in with an A level in the language is at the start of their first year. So we sort of do a fast track to A level standard in the first year. And in the second year, we build on what they built on in the first year. And then by the time you come back from your year abroad, you should all be on a level playing field.
Yeah, yeah. So now that's very interesting. And I suppose the big question is, would you do it again? Maybe you should have done Italian. How do you feel?
I feel like if I was the kind of person who 100% wanted to get a first in every exam that I did, I shouldn't have chosen Russian. 100%. Would I do it again? Absolutely. Not a doubt in my mind that I would have done this again. I speak Russian now. It's a very difficult language, and I understand how it works as a language because of the amount of hours that I've been forced to put in that I would never have put in if I'd have just decided to study Russian on my own. I know that because since then I've studied Czech, and I don't have the time to do 10 hours a day of Czech, obviously. So I just think it was such a good decision to pick a difficult language to do under supervision and under guidance and with the opportunity to have everything I wanted corrected. And yeah, so I would definitely do it exactly the same if I did it again.
So you'd encourage people to not be put off by the idea of starting a new language, even one of the more difficult languages, from scratch at university level.
Yeah, I would 100% recommend that they pick a difficult language, because once you get into language learning and you see how it's working and how it works for you, and also it can work as an advantage if you, for me, the system didn't work there, in my opinion, for how I learn, and it's taught me a lot more about how I learn. But I still have learnt Russian through sheer contact and so many hours. So I think it really teaches you a lot about how you learn, and then you can go back to Italian if you wanted to learn Italian or whatever the other language was that people want to learn. But yeah, take the difficult one.
Okay, well, Harry Ness, большое спасибо. Всего доброго.
Thank you very much.